Imagine being told that you won't survive without a new heart, or you won't ever see again without new corneas. Imagine knowing that your entire future depends on somebody else donating those organs, but that the chance of that actually happening is extremely slim. That is the reality for thousands of South Africans who find themselves living suspended lives, waiting for an organ that might never come. Around 4,000 people are on the waiting list at any time. Yet less than 1% of South Africans have registered as potential donors. If it was you or your loved one, wouldn't you do anything you could to change those odds? Welcome to A Gift of Life, a podcast series that examines the subject of organ donation in South Africa and asks what we can do to improve the chance of a second chance for those patients. I'm your host, Pippa Hudson, and over the course of this series, I'll be sharing stories of organ and tissue recipients, donors and their families, as well as the doctors, transplant coordinators and other professionals who help turn one family's tragedy into another family's greatest hope. I hope we'll address many of your questions around organ and tissue donation and perhaps inspire you to sign up as a donor yourself. In today's episode, we want to reflect on what it's like to be on the waiting list, hoping for an organ transplant that might never happen. That has been the reality for our next guest for over a decade now. And while medical science is able to keep her alive while she waits, the impact on her quality of life has been immense. Her name is Stella de Kock. She is the managing director of an organ donor awareness program called TEL, which stands for Transplant Education for Living Legacies. More on them later. First, let's hear Stella's own story. Stella, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what your life was like before you became ill?
So I'm born and bred in Pretoria, and up until the age of 7, I would say life was pretty normal. Mm-hmm. And then my dad got diagnosed with end-stage renal failure, and my mom trained to do dialysis at home, so they did the dialysis at home for about a year.
Gosh.
He then got a transplant from a deceased donor, and the kidney lasted for about 4 years. So, life went on. Kids don't really pay attention that much. So going to school, playing sports, etc. And then at the age of 40, he passed away due to total organ failure. Okay. So that was quite devastating.
Yeah.
Because, I was around about 13 at the time. And, but, life goes on and finished school. After school, went to do au pair work in Germany, came back, studied communication management, did my honors degree, started working, got married, and me and my husband loved to travel, so we traveled internationally. We did scuba diving, and I would say like a privileged life. I was healthy, just getting on with life. And, so that was life before I got ill.
And then the realization that, like your dad before you, there was something wrong with your kidneys. Stella, what actually happened? When did you first realize that something wasn't right?
So just before my 35th birthday, one morning I woke up, my foot was painful. The next day we were due to go to Mozambique for a scuba diving holiday. And I went to the doctor. It's kind of like, listen, my foot is painful, just give me meds and on with it, because I'm quite in a hurry. We need to go pack and do shopping and so forth. And then a few hours later, they phoned me because they drew blood. They phoned me and said, you've got end-stage renal failure,
Gosh.
You've got 8% kidney function left, and please go to the ICU. So
Wow.
I was devastated. I just couldn't accept it. There was nothing else wrong with me. My foot was painful.
Sure.
So next morning I walked into the ICU and said, apparently, listen, there's something seriously wrong here. So they did blood tests and further scans, and then they said, no, it's end-stage renal failure. We need to start dialysis.
Wow.
So you can imagine it was quite a shock. And then they told me that you can lose up to 90% of your kidney function before showing any signs or symptoms.
Unbelievable. To say a shock, Stella, a shock not only to receive that diagnosis when, as far as you knew until the day before, you'd been young and thriving and healthy, but of course a whole different perspective for you having watched your father battle a similar diagnosis. Take us back to that moment. What went through your head when they gave you that diagnosis?
Well, I thought, okay, I've got 5 years left to live. I mean, immediately I thought, okay, this is it. I'm not going to, live past the age of 40, and this is it. So I was like, really, it was unbelievable. And I was in total shock, total denial to, actually say, but this is now going to be my life. I've got a chronic condition that I need to deal with. So it was very, very, very difficult. And I would say it took me about 2 years to accept the fact that I had a chronic condition. The emotional side, I would say, was really the most difficult to deal with.
Physically, was there anything doctors could do to slow or reverse the deterioration or do anything about it? I mean, we'll talk in a minute about dialysis and then about the possibility of transplant. But before those steps were taken, was there anything else that was available to you to try?
Unfortunately not. They call it a crash landing because you start dialysis at 15% kidney function. So if you do, have kidney function, above that, then, they can adjust your diet and give you medication. But if you're on 8%, there's nothing they can do unless, they do dialysis.
Right.
So for me, it was kind of like, okay, you need to start dialysis now.
And let's just talk a little bit about that process, because I know most people have got a sense of, at least, of what it is, but still I think little understanding of what is actually going on in that process. You go to dialysis multiple times a week. Can you just explain a little bit about what that process involves?
Yes, so it's dialysis removes toxins and extra fluid from your body. So what they do is they take 2 needles, and it's a very, very big needles that they put into your arm. You've got a fistula that's to give access, for that needle. So they put 2 needles in your arm. The one takes out the blood, and it removes all the toxins as well as the fluid. Because when your kidneys don't work, you don't produce urine, and so you don't get rid of the toxins and fluid. So that builds up in your body. So then, the hemodialysis machine takes out the fluid and the toxins, and then the other needle is used to, put your clean blood, as they say, back into your body. So you get about 15% kidney function a week, whereas healthy people get about 24/7, kidney function. Yeah. So they still, I haven't peed in 8 years. So that means all the fluid that I take in stays in my body. And I've got a very restricted diet as well, because food high in potassium, we need to avoid that, because potassium has got an impact on your heart. So if you eat food that's high in potassium, you can get, a heart attack where your heart would just stop beating.
Sure. Stella, I mean, it's a gift to you that this treatment is available that can keep you going while you wait for the next step. But at the same time, it's an invasive process, and it's a lot of time out of your life. I understand you go 3 times a week, and it takes about 4 hours at a time. It must have a huge impact on your ability to work, to do the normal activities that you might have taken for granted before.
Yes, no, that's so true. Like I said, the diet, you're very restricted on your diet and your intake. I'm only allowed 5 meals a day. Gosh. So you can imagine that's 2 cups of coffee, and then that's it. And also the dialysis, you get tired afterwards. So you're not really able to do anything while you're on dialysis, because your one arm, needs to stay very still during the process. Yeah. And then afterwards, you do feel drained. So it takes about an hour or 2 to kind of just like normalize after the treatment. And obviously it's not just the 4 hours on the machine. It's getting to the dialysis center, getting off the machine, getting home again. So it's basically half a day, per week, for the 3 days that you are on dialysis. Wow. You're not really able to do anything else. Some people do manage still to work full time, but as in my case, unfortunately, I'm not able to.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's draining, and if you do want to go on holiday, you need to plan around dialysis centers.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that they do have space available and that you are in driving distance from a dialysis center.
The one thing we haven't mentioned is the cost of dialysis. Stella, I'm hoping you've got a medical aid that helps cover those costs. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about what's involved?
Yes, so I'm in a privileged position to have medical aid. It's around about 2,000 Rand per session, so
Sure.
you can imagine it's quite expensive, but the medical aid does cover it. And even if you are on a hospital plan, the medical aid will cover it, because it's part of a prescribed minimum benefit.
Right.
Yeah, and the thing is, just what I want to mention is that for the state sector, because they've got limited resources, they will only do dialysis for patients who qualify for a transplant. So that means, say for instance, you're over 50, you're diabetic, and you don't qualify for a transplant, they won't dialyze you.
My gosh.
In essence, it comes down to they'll send you home to die if you can't pay for your own dialysis or if you don't have medical aid. So that is a real, problem in South Africa.
That's huge. Stella, it raises the very important question, though, of why we're talking to you today. We're talking to you as somebody who is on the waiting list, waiting for the possibility of a transplant. You've obviously had a unique perspective on this, having watched your dad go through that process. But in your case, a kidney hasn't been found as quickly as one was found for your dad. How long have you actually been on the waiting list?
So I've been on the waiting list for 11 years, and it took me 2 years to get onto the top 50. Because I'm O positive and there's so many people, on the waiting list, that means when a kidney becomes available, they only test the top 50. And it doesn't matter if you're number 1 or number 50 on the list, the best match would then get the kidney. It's a long wait, and the reason for that, people would ask, but why? And there's various factors playing a role here. One is that if healthcare professionals don't refer a potential donor to a transplant coordinator, the process can't start. Then the second one is if families get approached and they do not give consent, the process won't continue as well. So just to give you a perspective, like for instance, Spain has got, their rate of transplantation is 30 per million population. South Africa is less than 3 per million population. Yeah. So we really, have a dire need for organ donation.
Yeah. Which you obviously face as a reality every day. I mean, what is it like psychologically? I mean, you've told us the effect of the treatment that you require to keep you going while you wait, and thank heavens that is available to you. But still, it must be agonizing. I would imagine at times somewhat demotivating to have been waiting so long, even though you know that wait is not atypical in this country. 11 years is a very long time to keep holding on to hope. Are you able to do so, Stella? How difficult is it to keep positive about the possibility that it might be your turn one day?
I would say you go through the stages of grief. So, typically it's anger, depression, bargaining, and acceptance. But it's not a linear process. Yeah. So during this 11 years, you do get some days where you wake up and you're just really angry. You're angry with your body, with why can't you just work? Why, did you attack? Because it's an autoimmune disease that I have, that my own body just attacked my kidneys and say, we're going to kill you, and that's it. And then you do get times where you're really depressed. And especially, when other patients get a transplant, you're happy for them, but at the same time, you're feeling like, but when is it my turn? Why doesn't my tissue match with anyone else? Because I haven't in the 11 years been called up once for even a possible, match. And, so it's really difficult. And then at the same time, people would like, but you can, a living donor, what's that about? Why can't you get a living donor? And the thing is with a living donor is they need to be, 1, healthy. They can't have any chronic conditions. And then they need to match with my tissue. So I had 4 potential donors come forward, and the first one we did the test, all the way through, and then they found scarring on my tissue, scarring on the kidneys. So they said, no, we can't put the living donor in jeopardy.
Yeah.
If she was a deceased donor, that would not have mattered, because she doesn't have life expectancy anymore if you're a deceased donor. But if you're a living donor, they're very strict, because they don't want to take from the living donor and give to you, and then the living donor is going to be in jeopardy. The second one had a problem with her kidney, so they didn't continue the test. Third one, all the way through, the last test, they picked up that the one kidney is not functioning as good as the second one. So, again, and the fourth one, our tissue didn't match. So, a living donor, it's not just like someone would come forward and say, okay, I'm going to donate my kidney and, Bob's your uncle and there you go. So, that's also very demotivating to say, but what is wrong with this, DNA of mine? Why couldn't I just get a match? So, it's a process, but again, your life can't stop because you're waiting for a kidney, because otherwise I would have wasted 11 years, so you kind of you need to get on with it and, try your best to do things that you can still enjoy and focus on that instead of focusing on the things that you can't do. Because then otherwise you're going to each morning wake up and just count the things that you can't do instead of focusing on, but I'm still alive. I can still enjoy life. There are still things that can bring you joy, and that's the things that you need to focus on.
Do you allow yourself to think about what your life might be like if a transplant does happen? I mean, is that a luxury you can afford?
I do. I do dream about the day that I can eat a mango, a whole mango. So, and to drink 2 liters of water in one go. That is it sounds so silly, but that's the bare minimum that I think about.
Yeah.
The rest of the stuff, like you've got more energy, you don't have to spend time on dialysis, you don't get needles in your arms. That's almost like a side note, but it's the simplest thing of that mango. That's really the goal, is to eat the whole mango.
Well, I know what to send in your gift basket when it does finally happen, Stella. Thank you for the tip. Look, you aren't, as you referenced, you're not sitting around waiting. You are carrying on with life and focusing on the things that you can do that do bring you joy. But also important to mention, you are doing a lot to help change the situation for all people who are on the waiting list. You're actively working to spread the message about organ donation, to raise awareness of the fact that we do have such low donor numbers in this country, and to raise the importance of having those conversations with your families. You are part of an organization called TEL. Won't you tell us a little bit more about TEL, please?
Yes. So the word play is also on tell your family, tell your friends that one day you want to be an organ and tissue donor. So it stands for Transplant Education for Living Legacies. It was established in September 2018 by an activist and 2 double lung transplant recipients. So they found that they've got a unique perspective on the field of transplantation. Because they're patients, they went through the waiting list, they did get a transplant, and the things that they saw that causes bottlenecks, as I said, one is the education for the healthcare professionals. Because there's a lot of myths and misconceptions, even on their side, that needs to be addressed. And with the transplant coordinator, they do go to the hospitals and tell their stories. Because when the nurses and doctors actually see the continuation of the story, because a lot of times they only see the brain dead patient and the story ends there. But they don't ever see what happens to that organs and the impact that it has on the lives of the recipients. So that is very important. And a story, if you see a person in front of you and they tell you, listen, I've got 15 years post-transplant, I'm able to live my life to the full. I'm not, for instance, Alice she was on oxygen. She said when before her transplant, her lungs sounded like plastic bags.
Yeah.
And like I said, 24/7 oxygen. She wasn't able to work or do anything else except wait for a transplant. Post-transplant, she's doing CrossFit, she's working full-time, she's traveling, she's snorkeling, she's just really living her life to the full. So that is very important for the healthcare professionals to understand that they must refer a potential donor to the transplant coordinator.
Yeah.
Our second thing is that we do is we educate the public. As you said, to have the conversation, because brave intentions need brave conversations. And organ donation is ultimately an extraordinary phenomenon, but it only happens when you have the necessary conversation. Because in South Africa, when you pass away and you do get approached by the transplant coordinator, that you need to give consent. And a lot of people haven't had the conversation with their loved ones, so that when the time comes, that the loved ones know that this was my wish to be an organ and tissue donor. So they would then say, but we didn't have the conversation, we don't know what the person's wishes were, so we rather say no. Instead of being able to save 8 lives and improve the life of up to 50 people with tissue donation, with organ, it's 8 lives that you save. So and then for the patients as well, because it's not an easy journey. Like I said, waiting for an organ, it's mentally, it's draining. And if you know there's other people in the same situation, it just makes it easier. It's still not an easy process, but it just makes it easier. And then post-transplant, because the immune suppressant medications have got side effects.
Yeah.
So people just need to understand for kidneys, it's a treatment option. It's dialysis or a transplant, but you never get cured from kidney failure. So if that kidney then stops working, you're back on dialysis.
Yeah.
So it's a journey. Some people end up living 30 years with that donated kidney. On average, they say you can get 10 years, but some people are more lucky than others.
Yeah.
So one of our campaigns is the Make It Known campaign.
Yeah.
So we're people who like tattoos and want to get tattoos can get a quotation mark. That's to signify you started a conversation with your family that you want to be an organ and tissue donor one day. And it's also a conversation started with other people. They would ask, but what is the quotation? What does it mean?
Yeah.
And then you can explain to them. So this is just a unique way to also raise awareness and get things going.
And I love the fact that so many tattoo studios have come on board with you for that and are either offering to do those quotation mark tattoos completely free of charge or at a very discounted rate because they want to support the concept behind it. So if anybody listening to this would like to explore that possibility, please go onto the TEL website, which is tel.org.za, and look for hashtag Make It Known to find the details of someone who'd be prepared to help if you would like to take that step of making your commitment to organ and tissue donation a permanent fixture on your body. I love the concept. It speaks to, this is my body and I want it to count for something even after I'm gone. I mean, Stella, that is the bottom line, isn't it? That this is a gift that someone can give that will outlive them in the most beautiful way and have a profound impact on the recipient one day. I mean, what a lovely thing to be able to say to your family that is the legacy I want. I'm sure it's something you would like to actively encourage people to at least start thinking about.
Yes, and just one thing that people don't understand is that even if you have the tattoo, even if you're a registered organ donor, if your family doesn't give consent, the process won't happen. Yeah, we need people to have this conversation because, again, no one wants to die and no one wants to talk about the time that they are going to pass away. But it's death and taxes. It's going to happen to everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of A Gift of Life. Please check out our website, capetalk.co.za, to follow the series in full and make sure you don't miss an episode. And I'd really like to encourage you to share these episodes with your own family and friends. Help start the conversation about organ donation in your circles of influence. If you'd like to register as a donor, please visit the Organ Donor Foundation on www.odf.org.za. It's a quick, easy and free process, and it could save 7 lives.